there's been a lot of changes in the gaming industry recently. We're looking at some payouts, we're also looking at some layoffs in the industry, and we're also looking at some success stories from a bunch of indie games right now. So there's a lot of things changing. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the news that happened this week in the gaming industry. So EA recently got bought out by the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund. Now, this is a huge purchase that has been happening literally like 2-3 days ago, where this news broke out. Well, the whole point is that they're gonna give EA a payout of $55 billion. That's one of the highest leverage payouts that we've seen, well, in history, not just in gaming, just in general, in all industries, right? So this is a huge deal. Now, why would you buy EA? I know that some of you out there are thinking, but EA only has this type of game or that type of game, or they haven't really done really good games recently, and that's all your opinion. But the reality is that if we look at the stats, we can see that EA is one of the most profitable companies in the gaming industry, right? It's placed as number 6 in all gaming industry. They're making a lot of money. So that makes sense why they want to be acquired. In fact, EA up until this point was a publicly traded company, meaning that you could have invested yourself in the EA company, and looking at the history, you would have actually made some profit out of it. So even if we have our complaints as gamers and as consumers, it shows that they are paying out and they are being profitable. And as much as we hate about microtransactions, people still paying them. So they've grown a lot in just this year. And that's why I'm not surprised at all by that the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund has set their eyes on EA. There's one main reason why the Saudi Arabian Investment Fund has been trying to, purchase them and has been trying to acquire them. And that is the mobile industry. So the mobile industry is very big in other parts of the world, especially in Middle Eastern cultures and in Asian cultures. So like basically West Asian cultures have really taken into using mobile games, and that's basically their preferred method of gaming, or at least very popular over there. And they think that EA could earn more money in their mobile. So EA up until now, with every single facet that they've done, has earned roughly a revenue of $8 billion per year. And this $55 billion payout that they're receiving is roughly 7 times the profit and the revenue that comes in every single year. So this is a huge thing. The problem is that although this is great, they're getting a lot of money out of this, the reality is that there is a catch, because not everything is good. There's always a reason. You can't just throw around $55 billion and not expect any drawbacks, right? So what is the drawback with EA's acquisition? Well, the drawback is that EA now will have a debt of $22 billion. So the way this works is, think of it as basically the mortgage of your house, right? So your house, you can buy it, and when you buy a house, that house costs something and you have to go to the bank and you get a loan, right? Well, in this case, the Saudi Arabian Interest Fund is the one that is getting that loan to pay out, right, your house, or in this case, the company EA. Now, just since it's such a good deal, they told EA, hey, we're gonna give you those $55 billion, but $22 billion of those $55 billion is considered debt. It's considered a loan, okay, that you'll have to pay out. That way, it's less risky for us to have made this $22 billion, this $55 billion investment on you. Well, that is because mobile games covers, that revenue from mobile games covers 15% of all of EA's yearly revenue, right? And as we can see here, just this year, it's gotten roughly $1.1 billion. Now, this is all sounding well and good, but you can kind of think $1.1 billion per year doesn't come close to the $22 billion debt that they're gonna have to pay off. And I'm assuming there's gonna be some interest in that debt, although we don't know what that number really is. But the Saudi Arabian company thinks that they'll be able to make a huge profit if they focus on that mobile industry, on the mobile space. This could work, but it could also not work. So here's the reason. They're just trying to make games to give money to shareholders, and they don't really care about the passion of making video games. And the argument here is that with this $55 billion payout, they'll be able to go private. Since they're private, they don't have to care about shareholders, right? So they'll be able to actually work on games as they see fit without thinking too much about the profit or anything like that. And thus they can put more attention into what really matters, which is creating those games. Now, that's what they say, but in reality, this investment fund is no different than shareholders, right? These guys are investing a bunch of money on EA, expecting a return. So they're gonna make sure that they get that return. But how are they gonna do it? Well, now EA is forced to take additional actions to try to be able to repay that $22 billion debt once they get acquired, which they'll do by, unfortunately, doing a bunch of layoffs on the industry. And this is a bigger trend that we've been seeing in general, especially with AAA companies in the industry, where there's been more and more and more layoffs as it's gone on. So since they want to focus on the mobile games, there's another issue that we will see, and that is the microtransactions. So how do mobile games make so much money? They make so much money by putting a bunch of microtransactions in games. The easiest one is just putting a bunch of ads that you either pay to remove, or it just enforces you to just look at ads all the time, and that's just more revenue for people in mobile, which is why a lot of people don't really like playing mobile games, because it's heavily incentivized for you to put a bunch of ads on your game, and people don't want ads when they're playing video games. So this is incentivizing, once again, EA to have even more microtransactions, which they've already been criticized before for having already too many microtransactions in their games. So unfortunately, I don't see that getting any better with this acquisition. And that leads us to another question. Are single player games dead, with, at least in regards to EA? Because they want to focus on mobile, and they want to focus on microtransactions and all these different ways to gain money. But the reality is, single player games don't give you a long-term money, right? You get a lot of money the moment it's released, but that's it. People who play single player games usually don't really buy microtransactions. The whole joy of microtransactions is to basically show it off to other people online, meaning that they don't get the profit that they would want. There's no increase in profit for those type of games. So will they die out? Will they use those teams to stop making single player games and just keep making games that they know they can monetize? If single player games are not dead and they still develop them, expect even more predatory microtransactions to be bogging down those single player games. Who knows? Maybe you'll have to pay just to enter the game every single session, or maybe pay to play online. Who knows? The point is that they'll be looking for whatever way they can cram in profit so that they can be able to appease the new private entity that owns them. But that just shows that the industry, AAA industry, is struggling. Another company that's going to be struggling with layoffs, or has been struggling with layoffs, is Avalanche Studios. Avalanche Studios, the one that made Mad Max Just Cause and the Hunter games, they had to unfortunately do some additional layoffs just this month, with them laying off the Liverpool studios and laying off all the employees that worked in that studio. Why are they doing this? Why is it that they have to lay off so many people? Well, the reason is actually that Microsoft has kind of screwed them over. Granted, not, I guess, intentionally, but Microsoft themselves have also had to do a lot of layoffs and a lot of cuts in their funding and a lot of cuts in their budget. Meaning that one of the games that Avalanche was heavily working on got cut by Microsoft. That game being Contraband. Contraband got completely scrapped, even though they had announced it. It was all this heavy push from Microsoft for this game to be released, and it got put on pause for a good amount of time because once Microsoft was doing layoffs, they couldn't really pay developers to make this game. And not paying these developers meant that Avalanche suddenly had less money to work with their budget for them to work on different games. It's completely lost time and effort because now they're not getting an income stream that they were anticipating and expecting, thus making them have to cut their losses and, well, lay off some people. So they've definitely been struggling. But Microsoft ain't doing so well either. They're gonna find a way to make their profits better. For example, by increasing the Xbox Game Pass pricing. The Xbox Game Pass has increased their prices by an astonishing 50%. Sure, I understand if you would have to increase the prices of your product, but a 50% increase is a huge increase. It's very unlikely people are gonna take that, easily. And in fact, people haven't been taking it easy. People have been complaining about how expensive the Game Pass will now become, some even saying that it's not even worth it anymore. Because if you were to buy a game, if you're not buying all the new games that are coming out, then you don't really need the Game Pass. A lot of indie games are a lot cheaper, and this added to the fact that people are already kind of financially strapped and trying to count their pennies to pay different things. It's not making it easy for you to just increase the prices. And the backlash was definitely felt. In fact, it was so bad that Xbox Game Pass subscription page went down because of the influx of people going in to cancel their subscription. So many people were canceling their subscription, their server went down. And you know it's bad when you have somebody like GameStop making themselves look like the heroes. Because GameStop has already posted a couple times saying, hey, if you don't like digital stuff and that you won't own, which is the Game Pass, you can always buy our physical games and we will actually, you'll actually own it and you can actually play it whenever you want because it's now yours. Physical media has been on the rise recently and they seem to know this is the case, so they're pushing for people to buy more physical media, in this case, physical game cartridges. Now, that being said, they even went out and posted it saying that they will not be charging you the $30 that it is the new Game Pass. Instead, they'll charge you the exact same price that they normally charge you for the Game Pass, and you'll be able to get the ultimate Game Pass. So them charging you the exact same amount before is a very smart strategy, and they didn't even need to do anything about it. They're still getting the exact same amount of money that they expected, and maybe even more, because they might bring a couple of customers that normally don't buy the ultimate Game Pass from GameStop. And the thing is, with these cuts that we're seeing, a lot of people are feeling the effects. And major companies, and AAA, are not the only ones struggling. SIROCCO, if you don't know this game, I don't really blame you, because this game I didn't even know of until I heard this news. SIROCCO is a MOBA game that is based out of Warcraft. It was a Warcraft mod, and then they went out to develop their own game. And so it's a MOBA based on ships, on battleships. And the whole point is, just like any other MOBA game, you have defense, you have all these components, but instead of being fantasy characters, you're different ships that are, equipped with different things and fight each other. It's a very interesting concept, but it just didn't seem to have blown up. And I'm finding it very interesting because usually the MOBA community likes finding out new MOBA games. But I never even heard about this game, and I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't either. Maybe what they need is a little bit of marketing. But unfortunately, when they launch, even though they've spent 15 years working on the product, they had to recently shut down their servers. Because although they had a peak of 882 players when they launched the early access, in the last few months, it was seeing barely 1 to 2 players. And servers aren't cheap. So they made the decision to shut down the servers so that way they didn't have to keep paying those costs. But not all hope is lost, because they did say in their Discord that they are very proud of the game and they plan on continuing work with this game so that way they can hopefully add more features, making more enticing, and hopefully when they have more resources, they can boot up the server again and they can have a bigger player base. What they need is marketing. Hopefully they get a good amount of budget so that they can actually start marketing the game. Because if people know about it, then you'll at least have maybe a small community that decides to play your games. MOBAs are very popular, but they are very competitive. So you gotta make sure that you cut through the noise and that your game, however unique it is, can actually reach your target audience. So here's hoping that they manage to actually get their target audience, and hopefully it becomes a success story in the future. But only time will tell. Luckily enough, not all news is bad, because although some indie games might be struggling, others are thriving, as we've seen with the release of Hades 2. Hades 2 was in early access for this entire time, but the 1.0 release came out this week, and it's skyrocketed in players, it's skyrocketed in sales. In fact, just in Steam alone, so it saw an increase of almost 100,000 concurrent players, and that's really good, especially considering that the game was in early access up until this point. So some people have already played the game, and now they get to play the full game. And this is just on Steam, by the way. This is not considering the fact that it's also available on the Nintendo Switch, it's also available on Xbox, and it's also available on PlayStation. So we're only seeing the numbers from Steam, and they already look really good because they've also been getting a lot of traction in consoles, not just in PC gaming. And this just shows that indie games are currently doing really well. Maybe there's some that always kind of don't get the traction that they need, but overall, they're seeing way more success than a lot of AAA games nowadays, which is this shift in people no longer wanting to play those AAA games, and the AAA games are no longer the games that are highly anticipated. Instead, the highly anticipated games are indie games. And what's even more impressive is that we've had a streak of really bad sequels in the last couple years, but maybe sequels are good now? Because Hades 2 is a sequel, Silksong is a sequel, and they both met expectations. They both did exactly what a sequel should do, which is they took the base game, took what was great about that game, added more into it without ruining the formula, and more importantly, they didn't just smack microtransactions just to try to get a cash grab from the IP. They loved their games and they actually made a game that people want to play and that it met people's expectations of that previously played these games. So once again, another win for indie developers, which seem to be doing super well. So much so that right now, the top 3 rated games of the entire year are indie games. That being Hades, Expedition 33, and Blueprints. The top 3 are currently indie games, and we haven't seen that in the past. So this is a clear shift in the industry where people are clearly being more interested on what indie developers are doing and are being a little bit more skeptical on whether they should try out the AAA games that are coming out. We're getting to a point where just because you have a well-known IP does not mean that you'll be successful. But we've seen a bunch of development and a bunch of releases of really good indie games. And just this month, we saw the release of Megabonk and a Clover Pit. Both of these games has been very successful, and it hasn't been that long since they released. And keep in mind, these are indie games developed by 1 or 2 developers. So if you take that into account, Megabonk has currently had 1 million sales, which with its current price of $10 per copy, that means that that single developer has seen roughly $10 million before Steam got their cut. And Clover Pit has only been out for 4 days and has had 300,000 sales, which is really good for a game that's been developed by only 2 people. That has allowed them to see a good amount of money on their pockets that they can use to live comfortably and hopefully make other really good games. So what we're seeing is that indie games are profitable and AAA games are not. But why? Why is that happening? Why are we seeing this ginormous shift? Well, the reality is AAA games have grown too much for their own good. Maybe that's why we're seeing layoffs, right? We've seen now that good games can be created with less developer and with enough time. But developers on AAA companies have everything against them. They have the money, but they don't have the time. And a lot of times they overinflate their groups with a bunch of developers. So this is definitely a formula where now we're seeing companies not being able to withstand the scale in which they grew. And that's causing them to basically implode from the inside. And it's not because people aren't interested in their games. They might be skeptical, but we're still looking forward to a lot of games, but we won't spend our money that easily nowadays. So if AAA companies want to actually win the market, they're gonna have to make good games, not just profitable games. This is just highlighting how the industry continues to change, and maybe it's for the better. Hopefully it is. Supporting small companies is something that maybe we should encourage or just celebrate a little bit more nowadays. And you can still, buy and enjoy what AAA companies do, but just make sure that they have your interest at heart and not just there to get a quick buck. But that is all for this week's news on the gaming industry. What do you think about the news? Are you excited for some of these games that have been released recently? And are you sad to hear that the industry is having all these changes? Or maybe you don't care about indie games and you want AAA companies to do better. You want them to release those games. Maybe you're that type of person. Let me know in the comments down below. And tune in next week to The Gaming Marketplace on Twitch, YouTube, or on TikTok. And if you want to check some news of your own, you can also go to thegamingmarketplace.com, where we have a tab there where it covers all the marketplace news that have been coming related to the gaming industry. Go ahead and check it out.